There we go. All right. Hello, folks. Welcome to week 6. We're dealing with the analysis. Just a quick overview here. We're going to go through the slides, do some question and answer. We will do the 3-week update on discussion questions for those who need to catch up. And also, we'll talk over any concerns anybody has regarding workshopping, because I've been answering a lot of emails this morning in regards to what to do with essays, how to handle the workshops, what to do about turning them in, or anything like that. Let me just make sure we get it clear right now. You will not be able to turn in these essays for a grade until next Thursday at the earliest. Okay. That's when the link will unlock for you to turn it in. That is in order to get these essays fully workshopped before you turn them in. So this week is the revision workshop on them. We'll talk over what you're supposed to be doing near the end of these slides. So let's go ahead and dive into the slides here. So first off, why analytical writing? Analysis comes from a writer's need to understand. By writing analytical essays, you're attempting to share your journey of discovery with an audience, and a well-written analytical essay will communicate clearly to the reader the exact information they need to understand along with the author. Now, we went through the examples here from Chapter 5 in the video lecture, okay? Environmental policy class analyzing costs for transporting food so that they can argue for their campus going green and doing locally sourced food for their cafeterias. You have Jim investigating the costs of 4-year college versus 2-year college, including advantages and disadvantages of both, and writing an essay about his findings. And then Amber and her Afghanistan blog, whether the U.S. efforts to rebuild Afghanistan were causing good. Okay. Now, all 3 of these situations involve the need to understand an important issue and the desire to communicate what's been learned. That is the whole basis of analysis. The whole basis of it is you need to break down something complicated into smaller pieces that are easy to understand for your audience so that they can understand it along with you. All right. Analytical writing is the most common form of college writing. It's something that most classes are going to ask you to do. The typical research paper that you do for a class is going to be usually an analytical essay. Okay, it examines an issue or problem, finds appropriate sources, analyzes the issue in an appropriate manner for the course. Okay, so most times a typical research paper is going to be an analytical essay. Now, effective analytical writing involves a few things. That has a desire to understand. You want to understand more about the topic. You want to understand why it's important. It has a careful examination of the evidence. What the facts say issue as well. It also has well-reasoned conclusions. Okay. Right. So there's going to be something that's derived in the analysis based on the evidence presented. Okay. It's very well reasoned. Now, Yagelski presents the steps of analytical writing through the story of writing. I did say hypothetical psychology essay that it doesn't go through the whole chapter, unfortunately. So he talks briefly about it, and he also talks about applying things to different fields of study. Okay. So we talk about the essay excerpt on page 130, the perils of being perfect. So first element of any analytical work is to desire to understand why something exists the way it does. Okay. You need to know what's going on. You need to want to know why something is the way it is. So you can do this through informal analysis, like talking with your friends. Why do they have the understanding that you have? Do they share your understanding, or do they have a different viewpoint? Read the news. What are people writing about that subject? What are people saying about that topic and why it is the way it is? Also, some light online research. Do a little bit of Google searching. See if you can find anything else about it. In academic writing, Analysis is shaped by the academic subject being studied. As you may recall, there were three academic fields that we went through a flowchart with. One of them was psychology, one was economics, and one was theater arts. So you got to see the process of starting with the field of study, and then you have the topic, then you have the specific element within that topic, and then finally the actual subject being analyzed for the essays. Okay. Starting off, one thing is a careful examination of the evidence. This has that chart, that table that was evaluating math scores versus income in terms of applying to and or attending college. Okay, opportunity in higher education was the title of that excerpt. Okay. When the evidence creates questions and the desire to understand, that evidence can usually be analyzed through a careful examination to find your answer. And we did do a little bit of examination of those numbers in the lecture. Well-reasoned conclusions, okay? Page 132, it has an essay about education researchers looking at government education policies, okay? So occasionally your trigger for analysis is a thoroughly researched conclusion that another researcher reached, that you want to understand how they came to that conclusion. Maybe you're trying to replicate some research, maybe you're trying to replicate some conditions, okay? See what you can do that will bring you to a similar conclusion, okay? You have academic writers rarely give simple solutions to analyses. Typically, their conclusions supported by the available data and occasionally raise new questions, okay? So, your point with an academic analysis is not typically to find a cut and dry solution to the issue being presented. Most times it's going to be something that you're going to use as a stepping stone for others to start doing their own inquiries. Okay? Then we go to performing analysis. Analysis essays typically involve three intellectual tasks which come together to create the process. One is using a framework, okay, coming up with a framework to analyze the subject. Second, making reasonable claims on the basis of the available information. Then third, supporting those claims. Typically all composed in the idea generation stage of the writing process. They are also typically refined as you continue through drafting and revision. Okay? So starting with the framework. Analysis requires some sort of framework to explain or understand a problem, trend, event, or idea. And this could be a theory, a principle, or a set of criteria, among other things. Now, I did talk about this in the video lecture. The example I gave was in terms of literary theory and certain ways that you use philosophies or marginalized groups or particular social movements as a framework to analyze works. Okay, you can use that for in literary analysis. You can use that as a framework for modern works, as well as you can try to apply older literature to that as well. Okay. Using a framework focuses attention on the specifics of the topic. Okay, that allows you to focus in on what you want to say, what you want to analyze, and gives you a way of analyzing it that makes sense. Okay. So you need to apply frameworks appropriately. Use all of the elements of the framework and apply them to the topic. Look at every element there is to that particular theory or that particular principle, whatever you're using as your framework. Okay, apply it as everything that you can to the topic. Theories should be used as a lens to help the reader understand the topic analysis. So if you get your reader in the right mindset and tell them, I'm looking at it through this particular set of philosophies or this particular set of circumstances or whatever, or this particular historical period, so on and so forth, that gets your reader in the right mindset so that they know what to look for in your analysis. And you have elements that create different perspectives on the subject also help with this. Okay, if you have firsthand knowledge, if you have sources who have firsthand knowledge, perspectives that can present some other kind of viewpoint, Okay, something that can round out the picture of your analysis. That's all going to be to your benefit. All right. Next off, making reasonable claims with available information. Claims that you make based on your research need to have a logical basis in the actual research. Okay, so you cannot just jump out of left field with something that really makes no sense. You can't make wide assertions without proof of them. Okay, so we read the excerpt on page 136 in the video. That was a student essay that was trying to compare gendered uh, uh, self-assessments of students to self-assessments of students based on nationalities, okay, and cultures, and then supplies a black or white decision that either the paradigm has shifted or the data is false, okay. Uh, just because the information didn't match up to his viewpoint did not necessarily mean that it's false. It basically meant that he was looking at it from the wrong perspective. He wasn't looking at it in terms of this is something that matches up with this, which matches up with this. No, he's looking at two entirely different comparisons. Okay, so that really doesn't work in terms of being reasonable. Okay, you should only make claims with a strong basis in evidence for which you have clear proof. Now, as we know on 137, this excerpt about nutrition, okay, specifically about fiber-rich diets. Okay, they used a lot of research data to come to their conclusion. As I noted in the video, that was over 250,000 participants in those combined in those studies. Okay, so that's definitely enough sample size to get a reasonable conclusion. Okay. Then we have supporting claims. When you make a claim in an essay, it will need to be supported by evidence to prove in a reasonable, logical manner that the claim is correct. Okay. Consider whether the support you offer for your claims are appropriate or if they're adequate. Okay. Now, appropriate claims are acceptable and relevant to the discipline. They rest on dependable, respectable sources and are consistent with your audience's expectations. Okay. Uh, then adequate claims are sufficient in terms of the type and amount of support. That is type in terms of studies and recognized experts. The type of amount of support in turn is persuasive for the intended audience. It's something that your audience is going to respect. Okay. The excerpt on page 141 was a political science essay that cited a very prominent political scientist, and that was considered to be not only appropriate support, but it was also adequate because, as I mentioned in the video, that particular theorist is considered to be the man in political science terms. Okay? That gets us to the evidence activity that I asked you guys to do, and I have noticed thus far on the discussion board, I'm looking at the topic right now, and there have only been 2 people who have attempted it. Okay? So I would recommend that to help you understand the difference between adequate and appropriate evidence, so that you know that you're presenting that in your own analyses, you should do this exercise. 2 primary claims that are made by the excerpt. One, I'm not going to list them here, but I am going to say that you need to determine whether the evidence presented in the excerpt is appropriate to the claims being made, and then you have to discuss whether they are adequate for the claims. Okay. Now, what I've got on the discussion board thus far is one person who is basically giving me yes, yes, no, 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 no. Okay, and then the second respondent has actually given an explanation. Okay, that's kind of what I want you guys to be doing, is giving an explanation in terms of what you want, why you reached that conclusion. Okay, I don't just want your assessment. All right. Now I'm going to skip the next slide because that is how Yagelski regarded that evidence. And since I'm not actually going through that evidence here, we're not going to do that. But Yagelski's verdict is in the slides and is in the video lecture. So the intent of the exercise is to have you pause the lecture, perform the exercise, and then when you come back, you'll see when you resume the lecture, you find out how Jagielski ruled. Okay? All right, so then we have the features of analytical writing. Okay? 4 main features. We have a relevant topic worthy of analysis. The topic is a good fit for the academic field of study. It addresses a relevant question in the field, interesting to the writer and relevant to the readers. Okay. As I mentioned, for this particular project, you're doing a scholarship essay. Those essays should be something that you got the topic from the scholarship provider. So they are going to be a invested audience. They want to know what you think about their topic because they have their own interest in the topic. Okay. So they're going to want to know if you know enough about the topic to justify awarding you a scholarship based on their own affinity. Then you have complexity. The exploration of the topic goes into as much detail as possible to best understand the subject. There should be a measure of objectivity and skepticism to make sure explanations are not oversimplified. Okay. Remember when we talked about Chloe Charles, she had a tendency to oversimplify historical elements about higher education. Okay, we don't want to do that with these analyses. When you're doing analysis, because of its explicit nature, you need to be as detailed as possible. You need to show us as many details as you can to give a full idea, an understanding of what that topic is. Okay, it should have sufficient and appropriate evidence and support. Sufficient evidence depends on the topic, the rhetorical situation, and the depth of analysis. So that's basically how much evidence you present and whether it is enough to be convincing and to prove your point. Appropriate evidence depends on subject, expectations of the audience, purpose of analysis, and field of study. So this is where you get that from, okay, where you get that evidence from, who's supplying it, what particular researchers have done the work, or who's stating it, or anything like that, okay, where it comes from. So sufficiency is how much, appropriateness is what quality. And then reasonable conclusions. Your conclusions, which would be your claim for your thesis and all other claims, must be interpreted from the evidence in the most logical manner possible. Your thesis should never be treated as indisputable fact. All thesis statements do have to leave opening for discussion and debate. Okay? There's no getting around that. There has to be some kind of opening for someone to disagree, so that you can try to argue and justify your side. Okay, now finally here is probably what a lot of people are going to want, and that is the revision workshop particulars. Okay, so this week is the first workshop for these scholarship essays. Okay, this is how you have to do it. Now pay attention to this because I've actually been answering emails all morning of people asking me what to do with their essays. Okay. You need to upload your rough drafts to your team's discussion thread on the discussion board. Now, I barely looked at it today, but it looks like that there have been a number of teams that have been doing this. Okay. Here's the thing. You'll be sharing it with your team and getting feedback from your teammates. So once you post your draft, your job isn't done. You have to come back to get the feedback, and you have to leave feedback for your teammates. Every member of the team must post revision feedback on every essay. Keep in mind, your teammates are depending on you. Okay? Now, I do give you a pro tip here. Post your feedback as a direct reply to your teammate's essay. Upload the essay as a reply to the thread, then reply to the upload to give feedback. Okay? The system will nest replies so that you can see that the reply you're giving is to that draft. Okay? Now, you must post a draft to your team's discussion board eCampus. This is highly important, okay? We mentioned earlier in the class that writing is a social activity. That means people giving you feedback. So you need to have a draft so we can workshop. You must check the discussion board on eCampus to find their draft and offer feedback, okay? So you need to be posting drafts, and then you also need to be reading other people's drafts and giving them feedback on what you feel like they're doing right and wrong. Okay. Now, this week is a revision workshop. So your feedback should be focusing on the content of the essay. I do not want you focusing on proofreading or grammar elements. That's next week. Okay? This week is all about revision. So what does revision entail? Part of it is organization. Is the essay organized in a manner that makes sense? That's going to be easy to understand and easy to read. That actually gets us to the next element, which is readability. Okay? This is how comfortable is it for you to read? Okay? Is there anything that is making you feel uncomfortable with reading the essay? And this could be anything from use of terminology that's poorly defined to lack of paragraph breaks. And let me emphasize this, okay? 1302, I've had to mention this to a few people already, okay? You need to have paragraph breaks, okay? I do not want to sit here and read 75 essays that are all one paragraph that last 5 pages. Okay? Paragraphs need to be one idea at a time. Okay? So if you are writing a paragraph and you find yourself shifting away from the initial idea of that paragraph, that's the time when you need to make a paragraph break and go to the next paragraph. Okay? So you do not want to make overly long paragraphs. Okay? Make sure that you're keeping them pretty brief. I know the standard they teach you in schools tends to be 4 sentences per paragraph. I'm not going to limit how many sentences. However, I do want there to be logical breaks in between in paragraphs so that it's broken up in a way so that I'm not reading a gigantic paragraph and having my eyes glaze over. Okay. Next is focus. How well can you stay on topic? Are you finding yourself digressing on anything that you feel like would make an excellent point, but it's starting to dominate what you're writing about? Okay. Make sure that they are staying on topic and not diverging away. For example, I will say that I've had a few essays from 1302. They were writing an argument essay. I had at least one person who was started off writing about criminal justice reform, and about midway through, it's a related topic, but they started focusing too much on mental disability and mental health issues. And while that's related to criminal justice reform, the problem is that they wound up letting that dominate the rest of the essay. Instead of ever getting back to criminal justice reform, they spent the rest of the time talking about mental health. So focus is going to be a big thing. Make sure that you're staying on topic. And then here, subject is well analyzed. Is there enough detail there? Is enough of a breakdown that you can understand what the topic is? The claims are supported sufficiently and appropriately. Okay. Are they looking at the right sources for evidence to back up their claims? Is it enough evidence? Is it the right kind of evidence? Is it coming from the right places? And then clear thesis statement. I cannot emphasize this enough. Okay, that was another problem I had with some of the 1302 papers, is that they were waiting too long to get to the point. Okay, there has to be a clear thesis statement. Okay, you have to make it fairly early on. Okay, I would recommend no later than the end of the introduction. But it needs to be clearly stated that this is the point that you're trying to make, that this is the idea that you want to emphasize in your analysis. Okay? So make sure you have a very clear thesis statement. Okay? Now, the discussion boards. Okay? So I know I'm having some signal issues right now. I'll try to do my best here, but go ahead and raise hands. And I will, when I see you raise hands, I'll recognize. Okay. Google. Okay. First question I've got is from the chat for Google Drive. Is that an acceptable alternative? Okay. It is an acceptable alternative. Okay. As long as you guys can contact each other through through Google Drive, and you can offer your feedback that way. I'm okay with that. Okay, just make sure that the files that you turn in are going to be in an acceptable format that eCampus can read. Okay, so it cannot be in the Google Drive format. It has to be in the 4 acceptable file formats when you turn the essay in. But for workshopping purposes, yeah, I'll allow Google Drive. All right, so any questions we have out there, go ahead, raise hands, and I'll recognize you and you can ask away. All right, Dan, I see your hand there. What's your question?
Okay, so it's getting a little frustrating because I'm waiting for my team members to give me my feedback, and I'm keep going back onto eCampus and seeing if there's any new updates, if someone turned in a rough draft, and I'm not getting anything. So I'm basically not getting any work done because no one is giving me feedback. And I understand that some people are so busy with other things, but it's I'm not getting any feedback. So I'm basically not doing anything.
All right. Well, unfortunately, it's not much. There's not much we can do from our ends here. That's basically going to be up to your teammates. However, what I can try to do is post an announcement for the class in general, just to let people know. Just as a reminder, let people get in the message boards and to offer their feedback.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I saw another question here. Looks like it was answering the Shanna the same thing. Okay. All right, no problem. Fernando, I see your hand there. What's your question?
You said it's not due till Thursday next, or we can't turn it in till Thursday next week. But do you mean is that our final draft, or is that still
That's for the
before?
final draft.
So that's our analyzed and everything.
Yeah. This week you're doing revision workshop. Okay. Then you need to revise the essay and prepare another draft for next week, which is going to be another workshop week for proofreading and editing. Once you get feedback on proofreading and editing, then you can apply that feedback and then turn in the final draft.
And that's Thursday, right? Next week.
Yeah, Thursday is when it opens up. It's actually not due till Friday.
Oh, okay.
I will explain here that I'm doing it this way because in the past I've made the link immediately available. Okay, and what has happened is people have basically turned it in after the first draft, figuring that they didn't need to workshop it. And that's something I want to try to avoid this time because it's missing the entire point of workshopping. Okay. Jennifer has a question. We have to copy paste what they're asking for us to write about in our paper, and then we start. Okay. The point of the workshop is that you have an essay already. Okay. You have a draft that they are giving you feedback on how well you are doing it. Okay. When you're getting their feedback, they're actually giving you ways that you can improve that initial essay. Okay. What you can do with the feedback you get is just take it in, consider what they're saying, try out some things with the essay, and see how well it changes. Apply some of that feedback to the next draft when you come back for proofreading. All right, Nancy, I see your hand there. What's your question?
So, the website you gave us, the MLA thing, to view an example, on the example essay, it said, my goal in the paper is to bring the source, and then it just talked about the goal. I was just wondering if we were allowed to include a lot of me and I in there.
Yeah, you're allowed to. Okay, I kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago. Yagelski actually says that you are okay to use first person, and that's actually very true of most college writing, with very few exceptions. If the instructor tells you that you can't use an I, you can't do it. But I am okay if you use I. I do not believe in essays having to be out of the first person, having to be in third person. Because many times, especially with stuff like this, where it's actually based on your own interpretation, there has to be a personal element to it. So you may as well own up to it. You may as well use the I.
All right, thanks. That's what I thought. I was just making sure I was doing it right.
Okay. All right, Fernando, I see your hand again. What's your question?
Yeah. So yeah, in the essay, right? I think that's what she was trying to say or something in the chat. But like, do we have to say like what we're writing about, or should that be pretty evident from our writing, like the topic that we are writing about?
Well, to be honest, it should be evident from your writing what you're writing about. Okay,
Oh,
you don't
okay.
necessarily have to. Uh, you don't necessarily have to share the prompt that you're working with your team unless it's going to make more sense. Okay. Uh, Theoretically speaking, though, once they start reading your essay, if you've done things right, they should be able to tell what you're talking about. They should be
Okay.
able to tell what your topic is.
Excuse me, I had a question, but I'm on the phone call.
Yeah, what's up?
So, if somebody's scholarship essay had, like, say, 1,000 or 2,000 word limit, are they supposed to change it to a limit that you want?
Yes, for the purpose of the assignment, I want you to use my page. I want you to use my length requirement, which is 3 to 5 pages. That's going to be, you said about you said the scholarship requirement is 1,000 to 2,000. 3 to 5 pages runs approximately 1,500 to 3,500.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, about 3 more minutes, and then we'll start talking over the weekly discussion topics again. And I just figured out why my signal keeps dropping out. It's because everybody keeps sending me text messages. I'm running the session through my phone Wi-Fi, through my phone's hotspot. Every time I receive a text message, the signal drops down to nothing.
Oh my gosh. Well, now that mystery's solved.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and talk over topics again. As I said, every 3 weeks we'll go over the topics that are currently available, at least the most recent 3 that have been posted. Just so that you guys who need to catch up on this will have an idea of what you need to be writing about. Okay, so we're going to start with week 4 this time. This was titled "The Sports Risk Rewards Quandary." Okay, and here is the topic that we're discussing. The pandemic has caused a lot of regular living disruptions around the world and society at large. Among the first casualties of the measures to fight the disease was sports leagues. As in America, the NBA and NHL were forced to stop their seasons within a couple months of their respective playoffs commencing, and Major League Baseball halted its spring training activities. This was not a uniquely American phenomenon, as in Asia, baseball leagues halted play, and most notably the English Premier League halted its season a month prior to its conclusion. For much of the late spring and early summer, there were no sports to speak of at all. When they resumed, it was under limited conditions. Major League Baseball started a shortened 60-game season in late July, with no live crowds in attendance, and Blue Jays temporarily relocated to Buffalo, New York after Canadian officials refused to let the team play in their regular home. NBA, their team, only those who had not been eliminated from the postseason, within bubbles where the teams could play and live quarantined. Well, the NHL set up 2 bubbles in Edmonton and Toronto to allow conference playoffs to go on. Late last week was announced that we would only for the series, which they chose to play at Globe Life Park in Arlington. I should clarify, they are doing a multi-bubble like the NHL did for their playoffs. They currently went into the playoffs yesterday. The round that they're working with right now will only be played at the stadium of the team with the better record in each round or in each pairing. The next round, they'll start going into 2 bubbles. Then it will become for a total of 4 bubbles. There's 2 for each league, and then 2 bubbles, and then finally the last bubble, which is the World Series bubble in Arlington. The greater test also began this past weekend as college football entered its second week and the NFL began play. College football has already been deeply affected as 3 conferences chose to not play this fall, 2 of them being Power 5 major conferences, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten not playing in the fall. That has changed. Big Ten is starting at the end of October, and the Pac-12 is starting at the beginning of November. It has also been affecting attendance by crowds, as each college has made its own call on whether to allow reduced crowds to attend, a controversial issue because some of the schools that are choosing to play football COVID-19 on campus. Most infamous of these being Alabama, which not only has been having widespread outbreaks on campus, but also having school officials trying to prevent widespread information on them getting to the press, even its own campus newspaper. The NFL has played almost all of its Week 1 games in empty stadiums with very few exceptions. A notable one, the Kansas City Chiefs allowed just over 3,000 fans to attend their Thursday night game. As an addendum to that as well, as of yesterday, we have had the first outbreak in an NFL team. The Tennessee Titans had 8 people, including 3 players, test positive. So they have been locked down through the weekend. Their Sunday game schedule is in jeopardy now. They also locked down the team they played last Sunday, which was the Minnesota Vikings, although not reported any illnesses thus far. For your discussion this week, talk about the impact of sports on society and how much their absence has affected either you personally or others that you know. Some regular reporters on sports have games. Has there been a similar effect around you? How do you feel about the startup of football season and other sports leagues continuing to play, however, isolated during the pandemic? So we have 5 resources that I gave you for this one. One NCAA.com, which is actually one that auto updates, so it should have the latest stuff about college conferences choosing or not choosing to play. We have sports, NFL COVID rules explained, everything to know about coronavirus and football in 2020. They have the New York Post, what I love and hate about this wild MLB season. That's actually a fan's reaction to what's been happening with the baseball season. Excuse me, ESPN.com, how the NHL has kept its playoff bubble coronavirus free so far. As it happens, the NHL's playoffs wrapped up this past Monday, I believe it was. The Stanley Cup Finals concluded. They were able to get through the entirety of their playoffs without having a COVID outbreak. Then we have GQ. The NBA bubble is safe so far, but the league's lessons won't work for schools and businesses. Okay. One note about the NBA, they too have not had a COVID outbreak since they went into their bubble, and that's even considering that they are in the middle of one of the hottest hotspots in the country, that being Orlando. Okay, so we've had quite a bit of engagement with this one so far. We've got a lot of responses. Okay, for those who have not responded yet, just an overview to give you an idea of what people are talking about. Many people are presenting their own viewpoints on it, how they feel about it. Okay. Some people are talking about leagues I didn't talk about, like Mexican soccer. Okay. So there's a few other viewpoints that you can look for here. Now we get to week 5. Okay. Week 5's thread: wildfires, storms, and the climate is the topic. And here is the text of it. Aside from the numerous stories in the news recently that have arisen in terms of United States politics and the worldwide pandemic, the biggest story has been the rising wildfires up and down the west coast of the U.S. The sky to an apocalypse and led to from Seattle to San Diego. Some of these fires were started through negligence. The El Dorado fire, for instance, was started by an explosive device used for a gender reveal party, while others were from natural causes. The end result, however, is the same, as the fire rampages through these states, and much of the damage has been attributed to climate change, creating the perfect conditions for these fires in the way of drought. What has fallen to the wayside, however, is another effect usually attributed to climate change: the increase of tropical storm activity in both the Pacific and the Atlantic. More hurricanes and tropical storms than normal have arisen this year, so much so that only for the second time ever, NOAA's Hurricane Center has reached the end of their list of hurricane names before the last tropical storm of the season formed. The last time this happened was 2005, the year of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. In both that year and this year, the storms formed after the list was exhausted or designated with Greek letters. As of writing this, Tropical Storm Beta was approaching the coast of Texas. Last time this happened, the final storm of the season was recorded in the middle of December and was designated as Hurricane Zeta, the 6th storm after the end of the name list. Tropical storm activity is also usually attributed to climate change because of the rising temperatures of the oceans, which feed the storms and make them stronger. Climate change is a deeply debated issue, even as the wide consensus of scientists agree that it is happening and must be reversed. Some politicians, however, choose to disregard science when it is inconvenient to the narrative they want to present to their voters, and tend to dispute climate change with great fervor. For your discussion this week, talk over your feelings about the fires, the storms, and the idea of the changing climate. What do you feel is the right course of action to help the areas affected both by the fires and by the increase in tropical storm activity? How do you justify your ideas? How has either wildfires or tropical storms affected you personally in the past? I was able to find 7 research sources for this topic for you. So we have one from CNN. California governor emphasizes wildfires show reality of climate change. CNBC, the West Coast is suffering from some of the worst air quality in the world. We have the New York Times. Some of the planet's most polluted skies are now over the West Coast. SciTech Daily, between fire and hurricane, U.S. West Coast on fire while Hurricane Sally hits Gulf shores. The Conversation, the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is so intense it just ran out of storm names, and then 2 more storms formed. Grist, the 2020 hurricane season is tearing through the alphabet at LMNOP speed. And then Market Watch, how the 2020 hurricane season could end up rivaling the worst on record. Also of note in regard to the hurricane season, you also saw the reformation of what was called a zombie storm. As it turned out, one of these storms that hit earlier in the year, Hurricane Pauline, or Tropical Storm Pauline rather, started reforming and was, last I had seen, be a hurricane and was approaching the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. Okay, and they confirmed that that was actually formed from what was left of Pauline. So many people, again, have responded to this, have given their responses in terms of how they feel about climate change, how they feel about the fires, how they feel about the storms. Okay, which is pretty much what I asked for. Okay. Now we get to this week's thread. This week's discussion topic is fighting hate through creative means. Here is the text of the topic. Over the last few years, as more and more hate groups grow more emboldened to operate in the open, it has become a conundrum for those confronting the hatred as to how to respond. Much of the problem has been identified by online service providers such as Facebook and Reddit, who are consistently trying to combat hate speech on their platforms by tagging posts and banning groups and individual posters. However, there are other avenues that have been tackled to confront the issue. Among these avenues includes businesses removing products either endorsed or supported by white supremacist groups. After the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, the Tiki Torch Company emphasized through their social media that they wanted no association with the marchers, who carried the company's product in a threatening manner while chanting racist slogans into the night. Intellectual property owners have responded to the conscription of their trademarks into white supremacist channels. The Detroit Red Wings launched a lawsuit against a group using their winged wheel logo with alterations for trademark infringement, while Matt Fury, the creator of the popular Pepe the Frog mascot that was adopted via 4chan by the alt-right, responded by killing off that character in its comics. Most recently, after learning that the Proud Boys used one of their products as a de facto uniform, British fashion company Fred Perry announced that the particular shirt, commonly called the Black Yellow shirt, would no longer be available for purchase in North America until its association with the Proud Boys was confirmed to be severed. For your discussion this week, talk over the ways that corporate entities can deal with hate groups and dissociate themselves. How does the actions by Tiki Torch, Fred Perry, and all the other companies involved rate as ways of confronting hate? What more could they do to confront the groups? How do you feel about the companies being involuntarily associated with hate groups? We have the New York Times. Tarnished by Charlottesville, Tiki Torch Company tries to move on. We have the Detroit Free Press. Why were white nationalists using the Detroit Red Wings logo in Charlottesville? We have The Verge. Pepe the Frog is officially dead. And the last one is a simply called Proud Boys statement. That is an official press release from the Fred Perry Company. Now, one other thing I should note, other articles have noted that they come out very strongly in the statement against hate groups and against white supremacy and things like that. However, some people have also noted that in the past, Fred Perry's shirts have also been used as a so-called uniform for British skinheads, okay, which tends to kind of undercut the message they're trying to put out right now. Okay, so so that's all of the discussion topics. Not quite as many people have responded to it yet, but I've got plenty of responses to it thus far. At least one person who actually quoted the last night's presidential debate, which is actually pretty related because it directly mentioned the Proud Boys. Okay, we've got a lot of interesting perspectives on this. Okay, it'll be interesting to see what other perspectives we can get. Right, so all right, so that's it for the discussion board here. Let's see, we got a little bit of time here left. We got about looks like 7 minutes. So let's see if we have any further questions about the workshopping, about the discussion board, anything like that. Go ahead and send them my way. Raise your hand. Let me see them. All right, folks. Since it seems like don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and stop the recording and let you guys take off here. We'll have another video lecture coming up next week. Just don't forget to get your workshops going with your groups. I will be posting that announcement immediately that I mentioned earlier regarding workshop participation. I will see everybody next week. See you then.